The blizzard hit Dodge City without mercy on the afternoon of January 15, 1878, turning the Kansas prairie into a white wilderness that swallowed everything in its path, including the stagecoach carrying Beatrice Foster and her dying dreams of reaching California before winter claimed her completely. She had been traveling alone for 3 weeks, ever since her father passed away in St. Louis, leaving her with nothing but a small inheritance and a letter addressed to an aunt she had never met who supposedly lived in Sacramento. The coach driver, a grizzled man named Hank, had warned her that traveling through Kansas in January was foolish. But Beatrice had insisted, desperate to outrun the creditors who wanted to claim what little her father had left behind. Now, as the wind howled like a wounded animal and the snow piled higher against the coach windows, she realized that her stubbornness might cost her everything. The stagecoach lurched violently to one side, throwing Beatrice against the wooden frame hard enough to bruise her shoulder. She heard Hank shouting something unintelligible over the storm, followed by the terrified screaming of the horses. Then came a sickening crack, the sound of wood splintering, and suddenly she was tumbling through a world of white and cold and terror. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs, and for a long moment she lay in the snow, gasping like a fish pulled from water, her green eyes wide with shock as she tried to understand what had happened. The overturned stagecoach rested a few feet away, one wheel still spinning slowly in the wind. She could see Hank pinned beneath the driver's seat, blood staining the pristine snow around his head. "Hank!" Beatrice scrambled toward him on her hands and knees, her heavy wool skirts dragging through the snow and soaking through to her petticoats within seconds. She reached the driver and pressed her trembling fingers to his neck, searching for a pulse she somehow knew she would not find. His eyes stared sightlessly at the gray sky, already beginning to glaze over with frost. A sob caught in her throat, but she swallowed it down. There would be time for tears later, if she survived long enough to shed them. Right now she needed to focus on staying alive. The horses were gone, either dead in the crash or fled into the storm. Her trunk had been thrown clear of the wreckage and lay half buried in a snowdrift. Beatrice struggled to her feet, nearly losing her balance as the wind tried to knock her down again. She could barely see 10 feet in front of her face. The world had become nothing but white and cold and the screaming wind. She knew she needed shelter immediately, or she would freeze to death within the hour. Her fingers were already growing numb despite her leather gloves, and her face felt like someone was pressing shards of ice against her skin. She stumbled toward her trunk and managed to drag it free from the snow. Inside she found 2 more dresses, her mother's silver hairbrush, the letter to her aunt, and a small wooden box containing her father's pocket watch and the last of her money. She grabbed the warmest shawl she could find and wrapped it around her shoulders over her coat, then forced herself to think clearly despite the panic clawing at her chest. Staying with the wreckage was useless. Hank was dead, the coach was destroyed, and no one would be looking for them until the storm passed. Her only chance was to find shelter, and that meant moving. Beatrice chose a direction that felt right, though she had no way of knowing if she was heading toward Dodge City or away from it. She walked with her head down against the wind, one foot in front of the other, counting her steps to keep her mind focused on something other than the cold. 100 steps, 200 steps, 300 steps. Her legs ached and her lungs burned with each breath of frigid air. Ice formed on her eyelashes, making it even harder to see. She began to wonder if this was how she would die, alone in a Kansas blizzard with no one to mourn her passing except an aunt who did not even know she existed. Then, when she had nearly given up hope, she saw it through the swirling snow. A dark shape, solid and real, rising out of the white landscape like a mirage. A building. Beatrice felt a surge of desperate energy and pushed forward, her numb feet stumbling through drifts that came up to her knees. As she drew closer, she could make out more details. It was a ranch house, sturdy and well-built, with smoke rising from the chimney. Someone was home. Thank God someone was home. She half walked, half crawled the last few yards to the front door and pounded on it with fists she could no longer feel. Help! She tried to shout, but her voice came out as barely more than a whisper. Please help me, she pounded again, harder this time, using the last of her strength. The world was starting to tilt and spin around her. She realized distantly that she was losing consciousness, that the cold had finally won. Her legs gave out and she collapsed against the door, sliding down to sit in the snow on the porch. The door opened so suddenly that she nearly fell backward into the house. Strong hands caught her shoulders, steadying her, and a deep male voice said something she could not quite make out through the ringing in her ears. She looked up and found herself staring into the most striking blue eyes she had ever seen. They belonged to a man in his late 20s, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell across his forehead, and a face that might have been carved from granite. He wore a simple homespun shirt and work pants, and his hands were calloused and strong as they lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. Jesus Christ, you are frozen solid, the man said, carrying her inside and kicking the door shut behind them. What the hell were you doing out in this storm? He did not wait for an answer, instead carrying her straight to the fireplace and setting her down in a chair close enough to the flames that she could feel their heat even through her frozen clothing. He disappeared for a moment and returned with several thick blankets, which he wrapped around her with surprising gentleness for such large hands. Can you talk? Tell me your name. Be Beatrice, she managed through chattering teeth. Beatrice Foster. The stagecoach crashed. The driver is dead. I walked and I found your house, and I am so sorry to intrude, but I did not know what else to do. You did exactly right, the man said firmly. He knelt in front of her and began pulling off her frozen gloves with careful precision. My name is Benjamin Dalton. This is my ranch and you are safe here. How long were you out in the storm? I do not know. An hour, maybe more. Beatrice watched as he examined her fingers, his brow furrowed with concentration. His touch was gentle despite the rough calluses on his hands, and she noticed that his eyes held genuine concern rather than the annoyance she might have expected at having a stranger collapse on his doorstep during a blizzard. Are my fingers going to be all right? They will be fine, but it was close. Another half hour and you might have lost a few to frostbite. Benjamin stood and went to a cabinet, returning with a bottle and a glass. He poured a generous measure of amber liquid and held it out to her. Drink this, slowly. It will help warm you from the inside. Beatrice took the glass with trembling hands and sipped carefully. The whiskey burned its way down her throat and settled in her stomach like a small fire. She coughed, her eyes watering, but she could already feel some of the terrible cold beginning to recede. She took another sip, then another, and gradually the shaking in her limbs began to subside. Benjamin watched her closely, his arms crossed over his chest, and she became suddenly aware of what a sight she must present. Her dark hair had come completely loose from its pins and hung in wet tangles around her face. Her clothes were soaked through and dripping onto his floor. She probably looked like a half-drowned cat. Thank you, she said quietly. You saved my life, Mr. Dalton. Benjamin, he corrected. And you saved your own life by making it to my door. That took courage and strength. Most people would have given up and died with the coach. He moved to the window and looked out at the storm, which showed no signs of letting up. You said the driver is dead. Yes, He was pinned under the wreckage. His neck was broken, I think." Beatrice felt the grief rise in her throat again and swallowed hard. "I did not even know his last name. He was kind to me during the journey, and now he is dead in the snow and I could not even bury him properly. When the storm clears, I will go out and find the wreck, and I will see that he gets a proper burial," Benjamin promised. He turned back to face her, and something in his expression softened slightly. "You cannot blame yourself for what happened. This storm would have caught you even if you had stayed in Dodge City. Sometimes nature does not care about our plans. I should have listened when he told me not to travel in January." Beatrice set the empty glass down on the small table beside her chair and pulled the blankets more tightly around herself. "I was so determined to reach California before winter that I did not think about the danger. My father always said I was too stubborn for my own good. Where is your father now? He died 3 weeks ago in St. Louis, pneumonia." The words still hurt to say, even after all this time. "I have an aunt in Sacramento, or at least I hope I do. The letter I have is 10 years old. She might not even be there anymore, but she is the only family I have left." Benjamin was quiet for a long moment, and Beatrice could see him working through the implications of what she had told him. A young woman traveling alone across the country with no real destination and no guarantee of safety at the end of her journey. It was the kind of desperate situation that led to tragedy more often than triumph. When he spoke again, his voice was gentle but firm. "You are soaking wet and still half frozen. You need to get out of those clothes before you catch pneumonia yourself. I have some things that belong to my mother. They will be too large for you, but they are dry and warm, and that is what matters right now." He led her to a small bedroom at the back of the house and brought her a clean dress made of simple brown wool, along with fresh undergarments and thick wool socks. "I will heat some water for you to wash with," he said. "Take your time and get warm. We can talk more when you are feeling better." He hesitated in the doorway, then added, "You are welcome to stay here until the storm passes and it is safe to travel again. I will not put you out in the cold, Miss Foster." "Beatrice," she said softly. "If you are Benjamin, then I am Beatrice." Something that might have been a smile flickered across his face, there and gone so quickly she almost missed it. "All right then, Beatrice. Get changed, and I will make us something to eat. You must be starving." When he was gone, Beatrice stripped out of her wet clothes with fingers that were finally beginning to regain some feeling. Her skin was pale and mottled with cold, and she could see the beginning of bruises forming on her shoulder and hip from where she had hit the ground during the crash. She washed quickly with the warm water Benjamin brought and left outside the door, scrubbing away the dirt and fear and exhaustion until she felt almost human again. The dress was indeed too large, hanging loose around her slender frame, but it was warm and dry and smelled faintly of lavender. She braided her wet hair to keep it out of her face and emerged from the bedroom to find Benjamin stirring something in a pot over the fire. "Venison stew," he said without looking up. "Nothing fancy, but it is hot and filling. Sit down and I will get you a bowl." The stew was delicious, rich and savory with chunks of tender meat and vegetables. Beatrice ate ravenously, not realizing how hungry she was until the food was in front of her. Benjamin ate his own meal in silence, watching her with an expression she could not quite read. The house was simple but well kept, with sturdy furniture and clean floors and small touches that suggested someone who took pride in their home. She noticed a bookshelf in the corner filled with worn volumes and a rifle mounted above the door. "Have you lived here long?" she asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "I built this place 5 years ago after I came back from the war." Benjamin set his empty bowl aside and leaned back in his chair. My parents had a ranch about 20 miles south of here, but they both died while I was away. When I came home, there was nothing left for me there, so I sold it and used the money to buy this land and start over. The war must have been terrible, Beatrice said softly. She had been just a child when the Civil War ended, but she remembered the soldiers who had returned to St. Louis, hollow-eyed and broken in ways that went beyond the physical. It was. Benjamin's jaw tightened slightly, and she could see old pain flickering in his eyes. But it has been 13 years now. I have learned to live with what I saw and what I did. Some days are harder than others, but mostly I am all right. He stood abruptly, as if uncomfortable with the direction the conversation had taken. You should rest. You have been through a terrible ordeal today and your body needs time to recover. You can take the bedroom. I will sleep out here by the fire. I cannot take your bed, Beatrice protested. You have already done so much for me. You can and you will, Benjamin said firmly. I insist. Besides, I often sleep by the fire when the weather is cold. It keeps me close to the heat, and I can keep the fire going through the night. His tone made it clear that there would be no argument, so Beatrice simply nodded and thanked him again. She lay awake for a long time that night, listening to the storm howl outside and the crackling of the fire in the next room. She thought about the stagecoach driver lying dead in the snow, about her father's grave in St. Louis, about the uncertain future waiting for her in California. But mostly she thought about the man in the next room, with his sad blue eyes and gentle hands, and the loneliness that seemed to cling to him like a second skin. He had saved her life without hesitation, taken her into his home and treated her with kindness and respect. In her experience, such men were rare. She found herself wondering what tragedies had brought him to this isolated ranch, what ghosts haunted him in the quiet hours of the night. The storm lasted 3 days. During that time, Beatrice and Benjamin fell into an easy routine that felt strangely domestic. She helped him with the cooking and the cleaning, insisting that she needed to earn her keep rather than simply being a burden. He taught her how to make proper biscuits and showed her where he kept the dried herbs he used for seasoning. They talked while they worked, sharing stories about their lives in the careful way of two people who were not quite ready to reveal their deepest secrets, but were willing to open the door just a crack. Beatrice learned that Benjamin had been a Union soldier during the war, a sharpshooter who had seen action at Gettysburg and Vicksburg, and a dozen other battles whose names were written in blood and gunpowder. He spoke of it only briefly, and she could see the weight of those memories in the way his shoulders tensed and his hands clenched. He had come home to find both parents dead of influenza, the family ranch falling into ruin, and nothing waiting for him but graves and ghosts. So he had taken what little money remained and ridden west, looking for a place where the past could not follow him. This land is harsh, he told her on the second day, standing at the window and looking out at the endless white landscape. The winters are brutal and the summers are hotter than hell. The wind never stops blowing and the prairie fires can destroy everything you have built in a matter of hours. But it is honest. It does not lie to you or pretend to be something it is not. You know exactly what you are getting, and if you are strong enough and stubborn enough, you can build a life here. Is it enough? Beatrice asked quietly. Building a life out here alone. Benjamin was silent for a long time before answering. I thought it would be, he said finally. I thought if I could just get far enough away from the war and the memories, I could find some kind of peace. And I have found a measure of it, I suppose. But there are times when the silence is so deep it feels like drowning. Times when I wonder what the point of all this is if there is no one to share it with. He turned to look at her, and the raw honesty in his eyes made her breath catch. I am sorry. I should not be burdening you with my problems. You have enough of your own." "It is not a burden," Beatrice said softly. She moved to stand beside him at the window, their shoulders almost touching. "I understand loneliness. I felt it every day while I was caring for my father during his illness. I felt it even more after he died, and I realized I was completely alone in the world. Sometimes I think loneliness is worse than any physical pain, because at least pain eventually fades, but loneliness just goes on and on." "What happened to your mother?" Benjamin asked. "She died giving birth to my brother when I was 6 years old. The baby died too. After that it was just my father and me." Beatrice traced a pattern on the frost-covered window with her finger. "He did his best, but he was never quite the same after she died. It was like part of him went into the grave with her and he was just going through the motions of living. When he got sick, I think a part of him was relieved. He would finally get to be with her again. That must have been hard for you." "It was. I spent weeks nursing him, watching him fade a little more each day, knowing there was nothing I could do to save him. And then, when he was gone, I realized I had no idea what to do with myself. I had spent so long being his caretaker that I had forgotten how to be anything else. The only thing I could think of was to find my aunt, even though I barely remember her and have no idea if she will even want me." Benjamin reached out and covered her hand with his own, and the warmth of his touch sent a flutter through her chest. "She would be a fool not to want you," he said quietly. "You are brave and strong and kind. Anyone would be lucky to have you in their life." Beatrice felt her cheeks grow warm and looked down at their joined hands. His palm was rough with calluses, the hand of a man who worked hard for everything he had. Her own hand looked small and pale against his sun-browned skin. She should pull away, she knew. It was not proper for an unmarried woman to hold hands with a man she barely knew. But she did not want to pull away. For the first time since her father's death, she felt something other than grief and fear. She felt hope. They stood like that for a long moment, neither speaking, until Benjamin finally cleared his throat and stepped back. "I should check on the livestock," he said, his voice slightly rough. "The storm is letting up a bit and they will need fresh feed and water." "Can I come with you?" Beatrice asked impulsively. "I have been cooped up inside for 2 days, and I would like to see the ranch if you do not mind." Benjamin looked surprised, but he nodded. "Bundle up warm. It is still freezing out there and the wind will cut right through you if you are not careful." They ventured out into the cold together, Beatrice wrapped in so many layers that she could barely move. The snow had drifted in places to heights taller than her head, creating strange white sculptures across the prairie. The sky was still gray and heavy with clouds, but the wind had died down to a manageable level and the snow had stopped falling. Benjamin led her to a sturdy barn where he kept his horses and cattle, and she watched as he fed and watered them with practiced efficiency. He spoke to the animals as he worked, his voice low and soothing, and they responded to him with obvious trust and affection. "You are good with them," Beatrice observed, scratching the nose of a curious mare who had come to investigate her. "Animals are simpler than people," Benjamin said with a slight smile. "They do not lie or play games. If they trust you, it is because you have earned it. If they are afraid of you, it is because you have given them reason to be. Everything is clear and honest. I wish people were that simple. So do I." On the 3rd day, the storm finally broke. The clouds parted to reveal a sky so blue and clear it almost hurt to look at, and the sun glinted off the snow with blinding intensity. Benjamin rode out early in the morning to search for the wrecked stagecoach, and Beatrice spent the time pacing anxiously by the window, worried for reasons she did not entirely understand. He had survived out here alone for 5 years. He knew the land and how to handle himself in dangerous situations. But still, she found herself watching the horizon with her heart in her throat until she finally saw him returning, leading his horse with something draped across the saddle. He had found the driver's body and brought it back for burial. Together, they dug a grave in the frozen ground behind the house, and Benjamin fashioned a simple cross from 2 pieces of wood. Beatrice said a prayer over Hank's grave, her voice breaking as she spoke words of comfort and farewell to a man who had shown her kindness when he did not have to. Benjamin stood beside her with his hat in his hands, his head bowed respectfully, and when she started to cry, he put his arm around her shoulders and let her lean against him until the tears finally stopped. "He would have appreciated this," Beatrice said softly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "A decent burial and someone to say words over his grave. Thank you for doing this, Benjamin. It means more than I can say." "Everyone deserves to be laid to rest with dignity," Benjamin replied. "Come on, let us go inside. It is too cold to stand out here for long." That evening they sat by the fire, the comfortable silence between them taking on a different quality than it had before. Beatrice was acutely aware that the storm had passed, which meant she would need to continue her journey soon. The thought filled her with an unexpected sadness. In 3 short days, she had grown accustomed to Benjamin's presence, to the sound of his voice and the warmth of his rare smiles. The idea of leaving and never seeing him again felt wrong somehow, like closing a book before reaching the end of the story. "I recovered what I could from the stagecoach wreckage," Benjamin said, breaking the silence. "Your trunk survived mostly intact. Some of your things got wet, but they should dry out all right. There was not much else worth salvaging. The coach itself is a total loss." "How will I get to California now?" Beatrice asked, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. "Without the stagecoach, I am stranded here." "The stage line will send another coach through in a week or 2 once word gets out about the wreck. Or you could wait until spring and travel with a wagon train. That would be safer, though it means waiting several months." Benjamin studied her face in the firelight. "Or you could stay here." Beatrice's heart skipped a beat. "Stay here? What do you mean?" "I mean exactly what I said. You could stay here on the ranch with me." Benjamin leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his blue eyes intense and serious. "I know we have only known each other for 3 days, and I know this is not a very romantic or proper way to say this, but I do not want you to leave, Beatrice. These past few days with you here have made me realize just how lonely I have been. This house feels more like a home with you in it than it ever has before. You fit here in a way I did not expect, and I think maybe I fit with you too." "Benjamin, I do not know what to say." Beatrice's mind was spinning. Part of her wanted to leap at the chance to stay, to build a life with this quiet, complicated man who had saved her life and treated her with such unexpected gentleness. But the sensible part of her brain was screaming warnings. 3 days was no time at all to make such a monumental decision. She barely knew him. What if she was making a terrible mistake? "You do not have to say anything right now," Benjamin said quickly, seeing the conflict on her face. "I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow or make any kind of permanent commitment. I am just asking you to consider staying for a while longer. Give yourself time to recover from everything you have been through. Give us time to see if this feeling between us is real or just 2 lonely people grasping at comfort." He reached out and took her hand again, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on her palm. "I know I am not much of a catch. I am just a rancher living in the middle of nowhere with more scars than money. But I promise I would treat you well, Beatrice. I would do everything in my power to make you happy." "You are selling yourself short," Beatrice said softly. "You are one of the best men I have ever met, Benjamin Dalton. You are kind and honest and brave. Any woman would be lucky to have you." She took a deep breath, knowing she was about to make a decision that could change her entire life. "I will stay. Not forever, not yet. But I will stay through the winter and we can see what happens. If things work out between us, then maybe I will stay permanently. And if they do not, then I will leave in the spring with no hard feelings." The smile that spread across Benjamin's face was the most beautiful thing Beatrice had ever seen. It transformed him completely, erasing the sadness and loneliness and replacing it with something that looked almost like joy. "Thank you," he said simply. "You will not regret this, I promise." The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Beatrice's life. She and Benjamin fell into a partnership that felt as natural as breathing. She took over most of the cooking and household tasks, but she also learned to help him with the ranch work. He taught her how to care for the horses, how to mend fences, how to recognize the signs that predicted incoming weather. She proved to be a quick learner, and he was an endlessly patient teacher. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up on his parents' ranch, about the summers spent swimming in the creek, and the winters spent huddled around the fire while his mother taught him to read. She told him about her childhood in St. Louis, about her mother's garden and her father's bookshop, about the way the Mississippi River looked at sunset. They shared their dreams and their fears, their regrets and their hopes, building a foundation of trust and understanding one conversation at a time. The attraction between them grew stronger with each passing day. Beatrice found herself watching the way Benjamin moved, the strength in his arms as he hauled feed for the livestock, the concentration on his face as he worked on repairing a broken saddle. She noticed the way his eyes sought her out across the room, the way his hand would linger on hers when he passed her something at the dinner table. The air between them felt charged with possibility, heavy with unspoken words and unfulfilled desires. One evening in late February, they were washing the dinner dishes together when Benjamin suddenly set down the plate he was holding and turned to face her. "Beatrice, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" She could hear the seriousness in his tone and felt her stomach clench with worry. "Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. The opposite, actually." He took both her hands in his and she could feel them trembling slightly. "I am falling in love with you. Hell, I might already be in love with you. I know we said we would take things slow and see how it goes, but I cannot keep pretending that what I feel for you is anything less than complete and total devotion. You are the first thing I think about when I wake up, and the last thing I think about before I fall asleep. When you smile at me, I feel like I could take on the entire world and win. When you are sad, I want to tear down the sky to make you happy again." Beatrice felt tears spring to her eyes, but they were happy tears. "Benjamin, I am falling in love with you too. I think I started falling for you the moment you opened the door and pulled me out of the storm. You saved my life, and then you gave me a reason to want to live it. I cannot imagine leaving here now. I cannot imagine a future that does not have you in it." Benjamin cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "Then stay forever," he whispered. "Marry me, Beatrice. Be my wife and my partner and the mother of my children. Let me spend the rest of my life proving to you that you made the right choice." "Yes," Beatrice breathed, and then his lips were on hers and she was drowning in the sweetness of the kiss. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, and she melted against him, feeling safe and cherished and completely loved for the first time in longer than she could remember. The kiss deepened, becoming more passionate, and she felt heat pool in her belly as his hands moved to her waist, then her hips, pulling her even closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Benjamin rested his forehead against hers. "We should do this properly," he said, his voice rough with emotion. I should get you a ring, and we should have a real wedding with witnesses and everything. You deserve that." "I do not need a fancy ring or a big wedding," Beatrice said, running her fingers through his dark hair. "All I need is you. But if you want to do things properly, I will not argue. I want to be your wife in every way that matters." They traveled to Dodge City the following week to arrange for a minister to perform the wedding ceremony. The town was busy and chaotic, full of cowboys and gamblers and dance hall girls, a far cry from the quiet isolation of Benjamin's ranch. They stopped at the general store to buy supplies, and so that Benjamin could purchase a simple gold band for Beatrice. It was nothing fancy, just a plain circle of gold, but when he slipped it onto her finger, she thought it was the most beautiful piece of jewelry in the world. The minister agreed to ride out to the ranch the following Sunday to perform the ceremony. They invited the few neighbors who lived within riding distance, though Benjamin warned Beatrice that ranchers in this part of Kansas tended to keep to themselves and might not come. As it turned out, 3 neighboring families made the journey, curious to meet the woman who had finally convinced the reclusive Benjamin Dalton to take a wife. The ceremony was simple, but heartfelt. Beatrice wore her best dress, a deep blue wool that brought out the color of her eyes, and Benjamin wore a new shirt he had purchased in town. They stood in front of the fireplace where they had shared so many quiet evenings, holding hands and speaking their vows with voices that shook with emotion. When the minister finally pronounced them husband and wife, Benjamin kissed her with such tenderness that several of the women in attendance had to dab at their eyes with their handkerchiefs. The neighbors stayed for a simple celebration, sharing food and drink and stories. They seemed genuinely happy for the newlyweds, and several of the women pulled Beatrice aside to welcome her to the community and offer their help if she should ever need it. It was a small thing, but it made Beatrice feel less alone, knowing that she and Benjamin were not the only people scratching out a life in this harsh but beautiful land. When everyone had finally gone home and the sun was setting in a blaze of orange and gold, Benjamin took Beatrice's hand and led her to the bedroom. They had not been intimate before, both agreeing that they wanted to wait until they were properly married, and now the anticipation hung heavy in the air between them. Benjamin closed the door behind them and turned to face her, his eyes dark with desire but also with uncertainty. "I have never done this before," he admitted quietly. "I mean, I have been with women, but never with someone I loved, never with someone who mattered this much to me. I do not want to hurt you or disappoint you." Beatrice stepped closer and placed her hand over his heart, feeling it racing beneath her palm. "You could never disappoint me," she said softly. "We will figure it out together, and it will be perfect because it is us." They came together slowly, learning each other's bodies with gentle touches and whispered words. Benjamin was careful with her, constantly asking if she was all right, if anything hurt, making sure that her pleasure was equal to his own. When they finally joined together, Beatrice felt a moment of pain followed by a sense of completeness so overwhelming it brought tears to her eyes. They moved together in the ancient rhythm of lovers, building toward a peak that left them both gasping and clinging to each other. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, Benjamin's arms wrapped protectively around Beatrice, and she thought that she had never felt so safe, so loved, so utterly at peace. The months that followed their wedding were challenging but rewarding. Spring came late to Kansas that year, the snow finally melting in mid-March to reveal the brown prairie grass beneath. Benjamin and Beatrice worked side by side to prepare for the planting season, repairing fences that had been damaged over the winter and getting the fields ready for crops. It was back-breaking labor, but Beatrice threw herself into it with determination, wanting to prove that she was a true partner in their life together, not just a decorative addition. In late April, Beatrice realized that her monthly courses were late. She waited another week before saying anything to Benjamin, not wanting to get his hopes up if she was wrong. But when 2 weeks passed with no sign of bleeding, she finally told him her suspicion. The joy on his face was worth every moment of uncertainty and worry. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure happiness, and then set her down very carefully as if she were made of glass. "We are going to have a baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to be parents." "We are," Beatrice confirmed, laughing and crying at the same time. "I hope you are ready for sleepless nights and dirty diapers." "I am ready for anything as long as I have you," Benjamin said, pulling her close and kissing the top of her head. "This is the best news I have ever received. I promise I am going to be the best father I can be." The pregnancy was not easy. The summer heat was brutal, and Beatrice spent many days feeling sick and exhausted. Benjamin hovered over her constantly, trying to get her to rest more and work less, but she stubbornly insisted on continuing to help with the ranch work for as long as she was able. By August, however, she had to admit defeat. Her belly had grown so large that bending over to tend the garden made her dizzy, and carrying buckets of water left her breathless and aching. Benjamin hired a young woman from town named Sarah to come help with the household chores during the final months of Beatrice's pregnancy. Sarah was a cheerful girl of 19 with red hair and an infectious laugh, and she and Beatrice became fast friends. She helped with the cooking and cleaning, chatted endlessly about the goings-on in Dodge City, and kept Beatrice's spirits up during the long, uncomfortable final weeks of pregnancy. The baby came on a cold night in early December, almost exactly a year after Beatrice had stumbled through the blizzard to Benjamin's door. The labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours, and there were moments when Beatrice was certain she could not endure another minute of the pain. But Benjamin stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and whispering encouragement, and Sarah proved to be a capable midwife despite her youth. When the baby finally emerged with a lusty cry, Beatrice collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted but exhilarated. "It is a boy," Sarah announced, wrapping the baby in a clean blanket and placing him in Beatrice's arms. "A healthy, beautiful baby boy." Beatrice looked down at her son and felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. He was perfect, with a dusting of dark hair like his father and tiny fists that waved in the air as he cried. Benjamin leaned over to look at his son, and Beatrice saw tears streaming down his face, though he made no move to wipe them away. "He is beautiful," Benjamin said hoarsely. "Just like his mother. What should we name him?" They had discussed names during the pregnancy but had not made a final decision. Now, looking at her son's face, Beatrice knew exactly what his name should be. "Thomas," she said softly, "after my father, Thomas Dalton." "Thomas Dalton," Benjamin repeated, testing the name out. "It is perfect. Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the world, son." The first year of Thomas's life was a blur of sleepless nights and endless diapers, of first smiles and first laughs, and the wonder of watching a new human being learn about the world. Beatrice had never been so exhausted or so happy. Benjamin proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor with Thomas when he was fussy, making silly faces to get him to smile, and working even harder on the ranch to provide for his growing family. As Thomas grew from an infant into a toddler, Beatrice found herself thinking often about how different her life had turned out from what she had expected. If the blizzard had not hit when it did, if she had not found Benjamin's ranch, she would probably be in California now, living with an aunt who was a stranger and trying to build a life alone. Instead, she had found love and family and purpose in the most unexpected place. The snow had covered her journey, hiding the path she had thought she was meant to follow. But love had revealed her true destination, bringing her home to Benjamin and the life they were building together. 2 years after Thomas was born, Beatrice found herself pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, her body knowing what to expect, and she carried the baby with less sickness and more energy. She and Benjamin had expanded the ranch considerably, adding more livestock and planting more crops, and they were finally starting to see real financial success. They had added 2 rooms onto the house, including a proper nursery for Thomas and the new baby. Their daughter arrived on a warm spring morning, slipping into the world so quickly that Benjamin barely had time to fetch Sarah from town. Beatrice held her daughter and marveled at how different she looked from Thomas. Where he had been dark-haired and serious even as an infant, the baby girl had wispy blonde hair and seemed to smile even in her sleep. "What about Emma?" Benjamin suggested, stroking his daughter's cheek with one gentle finger. "After my mother." "Emma is perfect," Beatrice agreed. "Emma Rose Dalton." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm over the next few years. The ranch continued to prosper, and Benjamin and Beatrice built a reputation for being fair dealers and hard workers. Their children grew healthy and strong, Thomas developing his father's quiet intensity, and Emma inheriting her mother's warmth and easy laughter. They had 2 more children, another boy they named Samuel, and a second daughter named Catherine. And the little house that had once felt so empty was now filled with noise and chaos and love. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Benjamin took Beatrice outside after the children were asleep and led her to the spot where they had buried the stagecoach driver all those years ago. The simple wooden cross had weathered and faded, but it still stood as a reminder of the tragedy that had brought them together. "I come out here sometimes," Benjamin admitted, his arm around Beatrice's waist, "to remember how lucky I am. If that storm had hit a day earlier or a day later, you might never have ended up at my door. We might never have met, and I would still be alone in that house, slowly dying of loneliness without even realizing it." "I think we were meant to find each other," Beatrice said, leaning her head against his shoulder. "All the loss and pain we both endured, all the wrong turns and bad decisions, they were all leading us to that moment when you opened the door and saw me standing there frozen half to death. Everything that came before was just the journey. You are my destination, Benjamin. You and our children and this life we have built together." "I love you," Benjamin said, turning to face her and cupping her face in his hands the same way he had on the night he first kissed her. "I loved you then, I love you now, and I will love you until the day I die and beyond if there is anything after." "I love you too," Beatrice whispered, and when he kissed her it felt like coming home. The years continued to pass, bringing their share of challenges and triumphs. There was the summer when drought nearly destroyed their crops, and the winter when scarlet fever swept through Dodge City, and Beatrice spent sleepless nights nursing her children through the illness. There was the joy of watching Thomas grow into a fine young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did, and the bittersweet day when Emma married a shopkeeper from town and moved away to start her own family. Through it all, Benjamin and Beatrice remained as devoted to each other as they had been in those early days when they were still learning each other's secrets. They had built something rare and precious, a partnership based on mutual respect and deep love, and it sustained them through everything life threw their way. On a cool autumn evening in 1903, when Beatrice was 63 years old and Benjamin was 68, they sat together on the porch of their ranch house and watched the sun set over the Kansas prairie. Their 4 children had all grown and started families of their own, giving them a total of 12 grandchildren with another on the way. The ranch was now run primarily by Thomas and his wife, though Benjamin still insisted on helping with the work despite Beatrice's protests that he should slow down. "You ever regret it?" Benjamin asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. "Staying here instead of continuing to California? You could have had a completely different life, maybe an easier one." Beatrice took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his, and smiled. "Not for one single moment," she said firmly. "This has been exactly the life I was meant to live. Every moment of joy, every struggle we faced together, every child we brought into this world, all of it has been worth it. The snow covered my journey that day, Benjamin, but love revealed my destination, and my destination was you." Benjamin raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You are still the most beautiful thing I have ever seen," he said softly. "That has not changed in 25 years. You are a terrible liar," Beatrice said with a laugh, "but I love you for it anyway." They sat together as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple. Two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built a life that would last far beyond their own time. The children they had raised would pass on the story of how their parents met, and their children would tell their children, until it became family legend. The woman who stumbled out of a blizzard and into the arms of a lonely rancher, and the love that saved them both. Years later, when Beatrice was 71 and her health had begun to fail, she lay in the same bed where she had given birth to all 4 of her children, and listened to Benjamin reading to her from one of her favorite books. His hair had gone completely white and his hands shook slightly as he held the pages, but his voice was still strong and his love for her burned as bright as ever. "Are you tired?" he asked, setting the book aside and taking her hand. "Should I let you rest?" "No," Beatrice said softly. "I want to stay awake. I want to spend every moment I have left looking at your face and remembering all the wonderful years we have had together." "Do not talk like that," Benjamin said, his voice breaking slightly. "You are going to be fine. You are too stubborn to give up now." "Benjamin," Beatrice said gently, "we both know I do not have much time left, and that is all right. I have lived a long, full, happy life. I have no regrets, but I need you to promise me something." "Anything," Benjamin said, tears streaming down his weathered face. "Promise me that you will not shut yourself away after I am gone. Promise me that you will keep living, that you will spend time with our children and grandchildren, that you will find joy in the world even when I am not here to share it with you." Beatrice squeezed his hand as hard as her failing strength would allow. "You saved my life once, my darling. Now I need you to save your own." "I promise," Benjamin whispered, "but it is going to be so hard without you. I know, but you are the strongest man I have ever known. You survived a war and built a life out of nothing. You will survive this too." Beatrice smiled up at him, and despite the pain and the exhaustion, her love for him shone in her eyes as bright as it had on their wedding day. "Thank you for loving me, Benjamin Dalton. Thank you for giving me a home and a family and more happiness than I ever dreamed possible. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." "No," Benjamin said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You are my everything, Beatrice. You always have been." Beatrice passed away peacefully 3 days later, surrounded by her husband and children. Benjamin kept his promise to her, continuing to work the ranch and spending as much time as possible with his family. He lived another 8 years, and during that time he often spoke of Beatrice to anyone who would listen, keeping her memory alive with stories of her courage and kindness and unwavering love. When he finally joined her in 1912, he was laid to rest beside her in the small cemetery on the ranch property, not far from where they had buried the stagecoach driver so many years before. Their children carved a simple message on the shared headstone that marked their graves. The snow covered her journey. Love revealed her destination. The ranch remained in the Dalton family for generations, passed down from parent to child along with the story of Benjamin and Beatrice. Their descendants would stand at the graves and remember the couple who had found each other in the midst of a blizzard and built a love that lasted a lifetime. They would remember that sometimes the greatest adventures begin not with careful planning, but with unexpected disasters, and that the deepest love often grows from the seeds of kindness planted during our darkest moments. The little house that Benjamin had built for himself in isolation became a home filled with laughter and love, all because he had opened his door to a half-frozen stranger and seen not a burden but a blessing. And Beatrice, who had thought she was traveling toward an uncertain future with a relative she barely knew, discovered that home was not a place on a map, but a feeling in her heart whenever she looked into her husband's blue eyes. Their story became more than just a family legend. It became a testament to the power of love to transform lives, to the courage required to embrace unexpected opportunities, and to the truth that sometimes getting lost is the only way to find where you truly belong. The snow that had seemed like a curse became a blessing in disguise, and the storm that threatened to end Beatrice's life instead gave her a reason to truly live. In the end, it was never really about California or finding her aunt or escaping her old life. It was about being brave enough to accept help from a stranger, wise enough to recognize love when it appeared, and strong enough to build something beautiful from the raw materials of loss and loneliness. Beatrice's journey had not ended when the stagecoach crashed in the snow. It had only just begun, and her destination was not a place marked on any map, but the heart of a good man who needed her just as much as she needed him. Their love story lived on long after both of them were gone, told and retold around dinner tables, and passed down through the generations like a precious heirloom. It reminded people that miracles can happen even in the harshest circumstances, that love can bloom in the most unlikely places, and that sometimes the best thing that can happen to us is having our carefully laid plans completely destroyed so that we can discover the life we were actually meant to live. And so the story ends where it began, with snow and cold and a desperate young woman searching for shelter. But this time, instead of fear and uncertainty, there is peace and certainty in knowing that she found exactly what she needed. She found home. She found family. She found love. The snow had covered her journey, hiding the path she thought she was meant to follow. But love had revealed her true destination, and it was more beautiful than anything she could have imagined.